Hello, hello everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, evening. What a wonderful waterfall. We've got 8 pages, that's nearly 200 participants rolling in. We're going to find out where you're joining us from in just a moment. Just let everybody get settled. Okay, so we will dive right in. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jade Harvey-Beryl. I'm part of the team at the Outdoor Learning Store. We're that charitable social enterprise offering outdoor learning equipment and resources for educators and learners, and then funneling everything back, 100% of our profits going back into outdoor learning nonprofits. I also work closely with Take Me Outside, who are our partner in delivering this workshop. I am grateful and honoured to join you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Snipes people, which has also been loved, cherished, shared and utilised by the Secwepemc, the Okanagan Silks and the Tlaha people. So we know that in the context of outdoor learning where we are, it's fundamental to develop our understanding of traditional ecological knowledge and perspectives and take the time to nurture relationships with the Indigenous people who've called this place home for millennia. And so if it's relevant to your place, we encourage you to consider what you can do to deepen your understanding. And thus, in this moment, we ask you to share in the chat what Indigenous territories you are joining us from today.
Thank you, Jade. While you do that, I'm going to take a minute to introduce myself. So hi, everyone. My name is Farheen. I work with Take Me Outside, and on behalf of Take Me Outside and our outdoor learning partners, we're really excited to welcome you all to today's spring webinar series workshop. I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe people here, otherwise known as Richmond Hill, Ontario.
Thanks, Farheen. So a silver lining that we take from the last 2 challenging years is the growth in virtual workshops. So with being able to offer these workshops online has enabled people from across our country and internationally to join us. It's enabled people who are more remote or underrepresented to join us. And when we look at this with well over 200 people joining us after your busy day, we know that the passion in the field of outdoor learning is roaring with enthusiasm, and we thank you today for being here as part of this community and working together as we all want to uplift environmental education and outdoor learning. So for those of us just joining Zoom 101, please type any questions or any thoughts you have in the chat. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A. I'm going to pose those to Megan and Sarah. And we ask though that you stay muted, please, just so we can stay focused. Thank you. And if at some point we might, with this many people, if we had any problem with video or audio, we might ask you to turn your video off. But for the moment, leave it on. See your lovely faces. Just try and find that person and give them a little mute. Case in point. Okay, so quick poll to get going. You shared your Indigenous territory, but if we could just get a little understanding of where people are joining us from, you should see that on your screen right now. We'll just take 10 seconds to get an idea. They're coming in. Oh, we've got a pretty good representation. I'm just gonna give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to share those results with you. Lots coming from Western and Eastern Canada, but we have some representatives from across the US. Nobody in Mexico today. And I normally have a rest of the world button, so I'm really sorry if I missed that off in the poll today. So if anybody feels is coming from elsewhere, please type it in the chat so we can know. And I wonder if you'd also like to type, who are you? Are you a K-12 teacher, or which specific grade do you teach? Are you a recreational educator, or just a parent or grandparent? Or okay, lots of teachers, all different grades. Fantastic. Childcare providers, incredibly important. We want to thank you for all of the work that you do. It's raising the next generation. So the Outdoor Learning Spring Virtual Workshop Series is brought to you by a group of over 30 partners and advisors. And I'm just going to share really quickly a little bit about them. So welcome to Looking Closely, supporting K-7 Emergent Inquiry Outdoors with outdoor educator Megan Zeni, and we have a special guest. So our partners in this are Take Me Outside, PAX Funds, Ecom, Green Teacher, Green Learning, Natural Curiosity, Water Rangers, Seabeam, EPSA, Wildsight, Geoc, Sask Outdoors, ACE, Stoked on Science, Get Outside and Play, OC, Classrooms to Communities, KB, Learning for a Sustainable Future, Imagine Ed, Eco Schools Canada, Leave No Trace Canada, Nature for All, the marvelous Megan Zeni, the New Brunswick Environmental Network, Seapaws, the Outdoor Council of Canada, Oceanwise, Project Work Canada, Interpretation Canada, the Interpretive Guides Association, Nature Kids BC, Project Learning Tree Canada, and we've got some new friends from south of the border, the California Association for Environmental and Outdoor Ed, the Kentucky Association for Environmental Education, the New Hampshire Environmental Educators, and the Environmental Education Association of Illinois. Thank you for all your work. And so into the main event. Joining us today to share their wisdom is Megan Zeni. Megan Zeni is a mum, teacher, master gardener, and researcher of everything outdoor play and learning. Her research interests include developing professional development learning networks with in-service teachers to bridge emerging theories with teaching practices that include unstructured outdoor play as a pedagogical approach. Megan piloted a rethink of how we deliver prep time in our elementary schools and has been teaching entirely outdoors in her West Coast school garden for the past 6 years, in all weathers, all seasons. Megan has over 25 years of experience as an educator outdoors, is a PhD student in the Faculty of Education at UBC, and shares her room as Room to Play as an independent consultant, and on her blog, meganzeni.com. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It's fantastic. And I believe we have a little extra special guest in Sarah, who helped co-create the Looking Closely kit, but I'll be quiet now, stop my share and pass it over to you. Megan and Sarah, welcome.
Thanks, Jade. Yes, so if you haven't met Sarah Regan before, she's in the house with me here. And we flew this morning from Vancouver to Cranbrook, and then we got in a car, we drove to Invermere, and we're in this beautiful house in Invermere. And so we're on our way to the NIPICA Leadership Retreat for EPSA. So we're stopping to do this webinar with you. So we're so glad that Sarah could join today, because she was one of the co-creators. And I'm going to share my screen so I can fully acknowledge everybody's work on this. So if you missed that in the introduction, Sarah and I are teaching partners. We teach entirely outdoors in the outdoor classroom. We deliver prep to teachers when they take their relief time or their prep time in the school. Sarah and I take the students outdoors. So that's our role. The Looking Closely kit that we are talking about today is the first, and what we hope is a series of kits that will be developed over time. And this kit was created in collaboration with Mentoring Nature Connections, which is Lauren McLean, and she is here today, so she might just wave so you can see her. And we acknowledge the support of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Council of Canada, which is often referred to as NSERC, in the creation of this kit. So the Classroom Gardener is a project that I work on with a number of other school gardening experts. And we partnered with the Faculty of Education at the University of British Columbia to start supporting schools who might not otherwise have access to garden pedagogies in their schools. And one way that we could do outreach beyond servicing schools in the Lower Mainland was to create a series that is hosted by Van Dusen Gardens. It's called the Garden Classroom Series. And then these kits that we are trying to put together is also another outreach project. So we hope to curate lots of these with the help of outstanding educators like Sarah, who works with me, and Lauren, who's another awesome educator. You can check out her podcast if you're looking for a new podcast to listen to at Mentoring Nature Connections. She's got lots of great thoughts and guests, and somebody else you might want to connect with in this space. If you want to follow along with the work that Sarah and I are doing, on the screen you can see Room to Play is where I am on social media. On Pinterest, I curate boards of ideas for things that are practical. There's lots of awesome, adorable ideas on Pinterest, but some of them don't work. So we sort of curate what actually works with groups of children on Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me at Room to Play. And then I blog as well at meganzenni.com. So there's a lot of moving parts that went into making this kit happen. And so I'm really excited to share it with you tonight. We are going to be talking mostly about why looking closely matters. So when we think about the core routine of looking closely, the reason we want to do that with our learners is that it encourages students to slow down, to wonder about the natural world around them, to be amazed, and to pay attention. When we hold space as educators for children to ask questions, which emerge as they participate in our natural world, we're able to authentically start to introduce scientific concepts and vocabularies, conceptual understandings in a way that's meaningful and relevant to the place that the students are learning in. So in this image, you can see the aphids on this plant. The students had noticed them, were able to name them, and it sparked a fascinating inquiry into organic pest control because we know that ladybugs eat aphids. And so it started this whole generative thinking around who are the beneficials and who are the pests in our garden, being able to categorize when we find an insect in our garden. Is it beneficial? Is it pesky? So just slowing down and noticing and looking closely can act as a doorway, as a portal into so much rich learning with your learners. And all it requires is to just go outside. And some of the tools and resources in this kit can help you do that. There are some supportive routines that you can think about as an educator to think about looking closely. So it can help when you're outdoors with your learners to set intentions at the start of your session outdoors. We often start with a story when we teach outdoors, which you're going to see in this session can be a really easy entry spark for learners. Our other advice includes co-creating boundaries and expectations for return with your students before you set them off to explore. And that way they're free to engage without additional limitations or distractions of you trying to keep everybody within a certain boundary. Simple prompts that you can offer to your students when you're sending them out to look closely is to just ask them, what do you notice when you go and walk around in these wooded area? Or what do you wonder when you turn over these rocks and logs? That can just be enough to spark interest into starting your looking closely routines. It can be especially helpful to revisit familiar outdoor spaces over time and across seasons to develop relationships with the land and to support an ethic of care for all the biodiversity of life in your local ecosystem. And when Sarah and I were talking about this and preparing for this, we thought we should also remember to add that time is an essential ingredient in this work. When you are looking closely, you need a lot of time. It's not sort of a 5-minute routine. It's a big chunk of time that you want to give children lots of time to engage in. It does get easier the more frequently you go outdoors with your learners. So if the first time you go, it's a bit of a hot mess, that's okay. Bring them back in, regroup, think about what you want to talk about, what those boundaries are, renegotiate them, and then try again. So the purpose of this kit and thinking about why we want to create these kits is to add some variety to your existing looking closely routines. And if you haven't done this kind of thinking with your learners, to get you started on a few really reliably successful ones. Okay, what can you expect from this kit? There's 10 books that have been curated, carefully curated to support perspective taking and emergent learning. Each book has a page of lesson sparks. We can show you what the kit looks like. Sarah's going to be my assistant here today. And so this is really nice that they're being printed up when they come out. So each book has a page of lesson sparks that can be used to provoke and deepen learning outdoors. It also includes tools and resources for looking closely. We really encourage you when you're thinking about looking closely routines to hold space for emergent learning and really resist the urge to have every interaction with nature be recorded. It doesn't always have to be written down to be valuable learning, right? Sometimes just noticing and naming our wonders is the best kind of joyful learning. And I'm just here today to give you a little permission to do that. Okay, so we're going to share some of the items that are in the kits. We're going to provide just one brief example of how you might use the book to spark looking closely routines in your outdoor classroom. All of the images that you're seeing so far and the images that we're going to share in this presentation are from Sarah's and my work in our shared outdoor classroom, which is situated in the unceded territory of the Musqueam people, which is now known as Steveston, British Columbia. And the kits that were put together by the Outdoor Learning Store, this was such a beautiful partnership because Lauren and Sarah and I were able to create all this thinking, but we needed logistic support. And so when we got the sample kit, I was like, yay, because they come, they come with these great little backpacky bags. So you can, it's a little tote that you get. All your books come in one bag and all your resources come in the other. So that is a pleasant, awesome extra that you get with your kit. Okay, let's start talking about the kits. I'm not even looking at the chat, Jade, so you'll let me know at the end if there's anything I need to answer. Yeah,
absolutely. Lots of people just sharing that they're so grateful to be here. I'm just sharing the link to the kits, and like even that bag you just talked about is made from recycled pop bottles. Lots of fun stuff. But yeah, any questions that come in, I'll be collecting them, recording them, and I'll send them back to you at the end of your speech.
Okay, awesome. So we've got a little bit of time still. So we're going to go through each of the books. Okay, so the first book that we're going to talk about is the book Sidewalk Flowers. And if you know this book, it's a wordless picture book. It's a beautiful book that inspires attention to color and the gifts of nature. And after you've sort of read this book, because it's wordless, so you sort of go through the pictures and sort of co-create the story and reflect on what the children are noticing in the text. You will notice in this book that the child pays a lot of attention and the dad is a little bit distracted, right? You can see it's beautiful, so cute. I see in Linda, she's saying, can this be used with preschool? Yeah, this would be, most of this kit would be suitable with preschool because it's so adaptable. You could use it from early preschool all the way up to the end of elementary school, because you know your learners, and a lot of this is very open-ended. So the books themselves are for all ages, and then how you follow up with them is up to you. So after you've gone through this book with your learners, I would try going on a walk with your students and photograph one thing that they notice or wonder or have a question about. And then pause occasionally and have the kids gather around and notice how the light, like, is it a cloudy day? Is it a sunny day? Is it early in the morning? Is it the afternoon? How does the time of day affect color that we're seeing? And then take photographs of what they're noticing and then start looking at the patterns of the colors that you're noticing. And maybe, like you see in this image here, we've got a bumblebee that's attracted to the marigold. Maybe you'll start to pay attention to which colors the insects that we're noticing are attracted to. Right? So you could consider making a bulletin board or a class book of all of the gifts that you've encountered in your walk. So in this image, you can see that children in our outdoor classroom in our school garden have so much fascination with the bumblebees. We get so many bumblebees in the fall. We plant pretty strategically for a lot of blooms and a lot of harvest from our garden before the end of June. And then again for after the 1st of September. So kids are quite happy to use the lenses and look closely. So we can show you what the lens looks like. We have a kit here where we got one. See, look at that. You get this, and it's we like this because it's kid durable. And see, it's got the big strap on it so they can wear it around their neck, because anybody who spent 5 minutes with any child of any age knows they're going to look and put it down, and you're going to go back and only have 4 out of 10, right? You're going to lose a lot. So comes with a lanyard, which is amazing. And you've got, it's rough and like it's kid tough, right? And it's got the safety strap on the back, which is important when you've got stuff around the necks of little kids. So you get those. Okay. Next book we're going to talk about is Step Gently Out. So this is a favorite book. It's a poem that encourages readers to notice and pay attention to the biodiversity of life in their schoolyard. After you've read this book with your learners, you could invite students to identify insects that they encounter, and then maybe do some research, some nonfiction reading and writing research, to research their specific preferences and life cycles. What do we know about these insects that we're finding? Some protocols to consider when we are looking and searching for bugs in our local spaces is to return any stones or logs that have been turned over in our seeking back to their original locations to minimally disrupt habitats. And also it can be helpful to invite kids, especially with this story with Step Gently Out, to consider looking at the impact they've had on the soil or the grass or wherever they're stepping when they leave the space. Like, what is the impact that we're having? What is our footprint that we're leaving behind? You could photograph that, you could journal that. There's lots of ways you could spend time thinking about that with learners. It can also be helpful to have garden gloves on hand for students that might be squeamish about handling insects. It can also help to make sure you co-create some boundaries about how long an insect can be kept in the viewer, because let's show the viewer too. We've got these amazing two-way viewers that come, there's 3 of them in the kit. And so they've put, oh yeah, oh, you can see it, look, there's a spider in there, look, the camera's showing it. So these two-way viewers are amazing because you can see under it and you can see on top of it, and the top comes off really easily. So you can add your little creepy crawly in there really easily. See, little spider in there, put them in, and then you can see them from the top, it's nice and magnified, and then through the side, you can see from underneath. So you would want to co-create some boundaries around how long we're going to capture an insect for to look at. And also just some morality around, we're not putting them in the sun, we're keeping them in the shade, maybe putting some soil in with them. You do want to make sure you're having those conversations with your learners. In this image, you can see that for this particular child, she found the buzzing. It's hard to see in this image, but these are purple asters and they're full of bumblebees. Like if you stand there, it's so noisy. There's so many bees. She found the buzzing very calming. And when she found that the situation she was involved in with other students was really stressful, she would just go remove herself and just watch the bees. So it's amazing, right? Just step gently out. Be with all that biodiversity of life. It's amazing. Okay, next book. Oh, yes, thank you. See, that's why I brought Sarah. She keeps me on track. There's all these field guides that are in the kit as well. So if you, for example, find some kind of bumblebee, or you find some kind of bug or slug or some sort of crawly and you don't know what it is, these field guides help you identify them. And they're quite water resistant. I wouldn't say they're waterproof. Like I wouldn't dump them in puddles. I wouldn't take them in a pool, but they're definitely okay in the rain, for sure. They're okay in the rain. And so you get copies of those as well that you can take outside with you. Okay, let's see. Next book. What John Marco Saw. This is a new to me book. This is a book that Lauren found and added to the kit. This is a fictional story that highlights the importance of slowing down. It's a beautiful book for that. And after reading this book, I would invite students to find something that's unexpected or exciting in your outdoor space. So you could take a photo and create a class book of photos that's, maybe with captions using descriptive words. There's a lot of ways that you could do this once you've initiated and ignited the idea of the importance of slowing down through the story. In this image, you can see that on a blade of grass, there's a cluster of ladybug eggs. And this discovery kicked off an emergent inquiry into the life cycle of beneficial bugs in our garden and understanding the whole life cycle of ladybugs and how we can create habitats so that they'll overwinter in our garden. It's a lot of fun. So this is what John Marco Saw is a nice story for slowing down, looking closely. The next book we're going to talk about is Treasure. It's a fictional story that supports perspective taking and an understanding. Oh, we got to come closer. Yeah, understanding that found objects in nature can be wondrous treasures. After you read Treasure with your students, you can invite your learners to collect loose bits from natural spaces, to craft a treasure of their own that they can share with others. And so the prompt for this image that you're seeing was, how are you feeling today outdoors? And students were provided wood cookie base plates. And then they went and collected the loose parts to add to the details as they found them. So what is a treasure for me might not be a treasure for you. And so everybody's aesthetic is different. And we've got lots of opportunity to notice and just appreciate what other people find beautiful. Okay. Tiny perfect things. We love this one. So this is a fictional story that encourages attention to detail. After reading this story, you can invite your learners to consider how seasonal changes impact each tiny perfect thing. For example, how do they change and grow and evolve over time? And so in this image, seeds, for example, are tiny perfect things that become something else entirely, right? And so there's so many questions and conversations and stories and thinking that each of these books brings to our Looking Closely routines outdoors. So we got to look at that one. Okay. Finding Wild. But this one, this is a nice one. I like this one. This is a gorgeous picture book. It invites children to see the wild spaces in their urban places, right? So if you are in a more urban school setting, you'll really appreciate this book. But even if you're in a rural context, you'll still like this one. After reading Finding Wild, go for a wild walk with your class. You can, again, use photography to photograph the plants that you encounter along the way, and spend some time researching if they're native species or if they're invasive species. The Invasive Species Council of BC offers amazing resources for teachers. Some are free, the rest are pretty low cost, but if you're looking for how to identify invasive or native plant species, that's a great resource you can use. So dandelions, for example, can be both, right? So there's some varieties of dandelions that are native, but most are introduced from Europe. But they're not considered invasive species simply because they don't cause a negative impact on the environment, the economy, or human health. So just something to learn from going out and walking and looking at the weeds and the cracks in your sidewalks, right? There's lots of interesting ways that we can be outdoors, looking closely in nature, even if you don't have a big forested space. Okay, next book, Listen. This is a lovely picture book that shows readers how to connect with the natural world by using all of our senses. So after reading this book, you can introduce sit spots to your learners. And this is a really important core routine in any outdoor learning practice. If you are not familiar with sit spots, Lauren has an excellent video on this. You can access it through her website. Maybe Lauren, you just want to drop a link to the YouTube there in the chat, but sit spots are really a core essential routine that a lot of teachers will do to introduce the idea of looking closely, but you can use it anytime. We were just talking about how we need to revisit that with some of our learners. So it can be used anyway. You can use it regularly in the beginning, let it go for a bit, pick it back up again. It's however you want to use it. In this image, you can see that students are focused on listening and recording the sounds that they hear and creating sound maps in their nature journals. Okay. Ready for the next one? Okay. We're going fast and furious. We'll leave time for lots of questions. Okay, Small Wonders. It's a beautiful book. Again, this text introduces us to the magical world of helpful and beneficial insects that help our gardens grow. So after reading this text, you can invite your students to conduct an insect audit of your garden, right? Or you can use a shovel to dig out a clump of soil and just look at what's living in it. So worm audits, for example, can be a great indicator of soil health. If you don't have a lot of earthworms in a shovel full of soil, you can introduce them to your garden. When we built our new school garden, we went over to our old school garden and we spent weeks. We were just talking about that. It was weeks and weeks every day where kids were digging up the old earthworms and bringing them to the new garden. And we sort of populated our garden with the new earthworms, and you can see in this image, they're happy and healthy, big fat earthworms in our garden. So you can spend time connecting to that. Okay, Flotsam. This picture book invites children to engage their imaginations as they move through the natural world. So after reading this book, you can go for a water walk with your learners, right? What's the story of water in your community? Where is it collecting? How is it moving through the community? Where does it go? What lives in the water along the way? So providing time to play in the mud and the water and see what stories emerge, right? Lots of time for playing in mud and water. And in this image, you can see students are busy trying to engineer a solution to the rising groundwater in our outdoor classroom. So Flotsam's a great anchor text for introducing the idea of just playing in water, seeing what happens. Okay. The last book in this kit is Puddle. This is a picture book that helps normalize all weather play and learning, especially in the rain. Yeah, there we go. You can see it. Yeah, we got it. Good. After reading this book, you can consider ways that you could measure a puddle using standard or non-standard units of measurement. What tools would you need? How could we measure our puddle over time to see if it's growing or shrinking? And in this image, you can see that students are measuring the depth of a puddle by whether or not it goes over the tops of their boots, which, as we know, lots of kids, that's how they measure how deep something is. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. That's kind of the books and the materials in the kits. Oh, we didn't talk about the binoculars. There's binoculars in the kit too. So you can look closely at those from far away. See, look at that, yay, so good. There's so many resources that we're really happier that made it into this kit. So that's an introduction to the kit. That's sort of a brief little taster of some of the things that you could do when you are thinking about looking closely. And what I'll do now, I'll stop sharing, Jade, and then I'll take some questions so we can make this as relevant as we can to all of our participants. Okay, go for it. I'm ready for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of those. And guys, is there anything more enticing than the covers of these beautiful books? Just want you to go outside. Okay, we had a few different bits coming in. There was some stuff going on in the chat that we were talking about. So Sue asked, are there any digital versions for the books? My board is hybrid at the moment, and it'd be nice to offer these books to our online learners.
Digital copies of books generally come from publishers. They tend to discourage anybody sort of reading them online and sharing them online. Sometimes if you check with your library, you can get the books on tape. I see more and more children's books being offered in audiobook format. But I don't know, unless Jade, if you have information on whether or not these are being available digitally. I don't know.
No, I would say if you had the main book, then reading it in front of the camera, if it's in for your personal audience, I think that would be allowed, as it would be a learning setting. But the kits do come with a PDF downloadable lesson spark. So anything that's coming on there, activities and things are digital, so those could be shared out that way.
Yeah.
Okay,
and the books are all hardcover, which helps too. Like, we were very specific; they needed to be hardcover when we're going outdoors with them. Yeah.
So we had a couple of questions about funding and the equipment within. Lee said, is there a pared down kit for people who can't maybe afford the full thing? And Carly asked about possible grants. And I kind of was able to answer that in that, yes, you can buy every individual thing on the store as well. So you could just pick and choose what suited you in that moment. And also I've got another link here that I'm going to pop in the chat again, where we curated a list of general funders that you could go and look for. But if you're in BC, there's Go Grants, there's a couple of different things. If you're in Saskatchewan, there's Sask Outdoors Micro Grants. Learning for a Sustainable Future is worldwide, Canada-wide. So there is lots of options out there for sure. And this list will give you a good place to start.
And all of the books that we've mentioned in this session and that are in the kit are listed. So you would be able to borrow them from the library. Your librarian at your school potentially would be able to just purchase the books for you. And then you could sort of cobble together the other pieces. In terms of the ideas, like extending the learning, once you start with a looking closely routine, a lot of it just takes care of itself. The kids will actually find the learning and introduce it. There's so little that we as teachers have to do when we think about looking closely with our students, except hold and protect a lot of time and space for kids to have the freedom to explore. A lot of it will just happen naturally if you're giving them the space to do that, for sure.
Beautiful. Maria asked, because people liked you mentioned about the invasive species. Maria said, could that be adapted to older learners? If so, how old?
Yeah, so the Invasive Species Council has resources that would be suitable from preschool to adult learners. You could go through and browse through the resources that they have. They do a lot of field guides. They have a lot of plant this, not that resources. I suspect each province across Canada would have their own Invasive Species Council. Because I'm located in BC, I'm familiar with our Invasive Species Council. And depending on where you are from, different plants become more invasive depending on your climate where you're living, right? So if you have a climate that's conducive to plants, and if you're looking at immigration, for example, as a concept with your learners, you can look at which people have come to where you're living and where they came from, and then which plants they brought and which foods they brought. And there's so many cross-curricular ways we can tie into just from going for a walk through a community garden and seeing what plants people are growing, or noticing the weeds and then connecting that with some of the indigenous plant knowledge from your territory that you're in and how they've named those plants, right? There's lots of cool facts that you can dig into that are very place specific. So what's accurate for me where I am on the West Coast is not going to be accurate for other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I'll get the link to the Invasive Species Council of Canada's website as well. I've put in the BC ones, and yeah, they've each got their own, and the Council of Canada will help you find the one that's relevant for you.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions about school gardens. April and Madison asked, what do you suggest planting in a school garden? And April was saying, what would be your must-haves?
So in the context of looking closely in school gardens, I mean, there's so many things you can plant in school gardens, right? Ultimately, you want something that can be planted and harvested before the end of June, right? Or is going to be harvested after when you come back from school in September. Really easy stuff to grow in school gardens are peas, because we can plant them as soon as the soil thaws. And generally speaking, they're ready to be harvested before the end of before we leave for school in the summer. So peas are really easy because they don't need to be processed, right? If you want a lot more detail on like which plants to plant and when, on my website, I have a lot of recommended crops for school gardeners. Some of them are all like potatoes are really easy to grow in school gardens and they're a lot of fun, but depending on where you are, where you're growing, they do need to be processed. Nobody eats raw potatoes, that kind of thing, right? So there's different, yeah, that would be a good follow-up on my website question. And then for looking closely, I would say anything, school gardens don't have to be food driven either, right? They can be pollinator gardens, anything that's attracting beneficial bugs. You can get involved in pollinator corridor projects where you create urban corridors for butterflies and other pollinators to move through urban centers. And so you can plant anything that is blooming and thinking about having a staggered bloom time. So there's always food for our pollinators as they move through the garden. That's my recommendation.
That's lovely. I'm not sure if this ties on to planting or generally, but Anne was asking, what suggestions do you have for cold winter climates?
Yeah, so if you're looking closely outdoors, you can still go outside. You can still spend that time. If you're snow covered, then noticing like how the snow is drifting, like I think you have to look at your place. All of this comes back to what place are you in? What are the stories of your place? And what do you want children to notice, right? And so connecting with the indigenous stories of your place, connecting with how people and water move through your place, connecting with farmers and the foods that they're growing in the fields in your place. So even if you're in a cold climate, all of those stories will exist. And so really connecting with your community and connecting with who has spent time so that you can learn like with and from the land, not just about it while you're inside, if that makes sense.
And we have lots of snow here. We do lots of tracks and scat finding, right? Paying attention to that. And then even trying to make our own track stories where we use our fingers to make the shapes of different animal paws, and then groups of students tell their own story about what happened between predators.
And then like where are their dens and where are they going, and then where are their habitats, like how is that affecting that, and how that's moving seasonally and then year over year. Sometimes you'll have different creatures that are in different spaces and they're moving, and just watching that, paying attention for sure.
Renata asks, does the kit come with lesson plans?
Yes, well, they're not lesson plans.
Yes.
They're less of a plan because it's really hard to replicate what I do in my school garden or what we do when we're teaching in your place. This is the challenge, I think, of land-based learning, is that we cannot create something that you can pick up and use in your land. It's different. Every schoolyard is different. So what you're looking at are sparks and provocations and invitations and high-level thinking to help, when you've read the book with your learners, what you could do to get those kids outside more often, and you don't have to do a lot of planning around it. So it's very inquiry focused, very open based. The way that they're set up is that there's one section that says some ideas to spark emergent learning. So we might give a suggestion for something that you could do, an action that you could do to follow up with the book. And then there's a section that says questions to deepen learning. And so those are specific questions that you might want to use as journal prompts, or questions that you might want to use in a circle, a reflection circle with learners. So they're not lesson plans per se, but they are sparks and invitations for learning.
Yeah, thank God.
Beautiful, thank you. Lorraine asks, she asked, what about the pamphlets of lessons that you showed at the beginning? Are they available separately?
That's going to be up to the outdoor learning store. I think they lose their context without the books. We're not doing this to make the money, so I don't know. We'd have to figure out how that works if we make them available. I don't know.
I think at the moment the idea is that with your expertise and your energy and, you know, what you've put into creating and curating this kit, that yeah, they do really work together as a unit and with bouncing off of the equipment and resources. So at the moment, just part of a team.
Yeah, but it's a good question. It might be something that down the road we can just make them available. I think for now we want to try and encourage people to have the books with the resources and everything together.
Jim's got a straight, direct, I'm walking through the forest with 18 students. They're 8 years old. I've got 2 adults, 45 minutes. What am I doing? What activities am I doing to engage?
Let them play. You don't have to do anything. You've got a forest. So we're big fans of play as the spark, the ultimate spark of learning. So I come from the lineage of thinking that play is learning. So ultimately, if I'm in a forest with a group of 8-year-olds or 7-year-olds or whatever age they are, we are making sure that we've co-created some boundaries so that everybody knows where the limits are. And generally how we do that is we wear a reflective vest. We take that reflective vest off, we hang it from a tree. If you can't see the vest, you've gone out of bounds. That's the boundary, right? So if we're in a very clear open space, you can go until you can't see the vest, right? Now, that said, it's really important that as the adult, you've done a risk-benefit assessment of the area before you send kids off to play in it, right? You want to make sure that all of the hazards that could exist in any forested space are mitigated, removed, or that you've put a boundary around that area. But generally speaking, if you are in a place for the first time, play is the way to go. The kids will find the learning, they will bring it to you. And then your job as the adult, as the teacher, is to start scaffolding on what they're noticing and helping them name it, and then building out invitations and provocations to extend the learning. And then what we do is we sort of start mapping the curriculum, that the obligation that we have as teachers, the provincial curriculum, we start mapping that onto the learning and naming it. So this is a water cycle that you're noticing, right? Or this is a life cycle that you're noticing. And so we're starting to give them the scientific terminology that we can use. So precipitation, right? Rain, a scientist calls it precipitation. A scientist calls it evaporation. And so we're starting to give them the vocabulary in an authentic way based on what they've noticed through play.
Beautiful, couldn't agree more. And lots of people like Melissa and people writing in and adding in. Yeah, really mirroring what you're saying and that feeling. Okay, quick, just adding on some people have got to leave early. For a sad reason. I'm sorry to hear that. I won't share that. The recording will be available. This is recorded. It's actually going to be uploaded straight after this, and then you'll get a follow-up email with links to the recording, links to fill in a form and get your certificate of participation if that's important to you, and links to resources mentioned in this workshop. So do not despair. You won't miss anything. Okay, Joanna asks, what would be your advice for kids who might have fears of bees and wasps? And for me, I've had flies, I've had soil, where do we go?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes from experience. So either like listening to why they have a fear of it. If they, often children are afraid because they think they'll get in trouble if they get dirty. So that's a parental sort of intergenerational fear that they have, that they're going to get in trouble if their clothes are dirty. So communicating really clearly to families that we spend a lot of time outdoors, we're going to get dirty, make sure you're wearing clothes that are suitable and appropriate for outdoor play. And then if they're fearful about the bees or the wasps or the ants, so what we want to do with that is shift the perspective from fear to curiosity, right? So helping children, instead of screaming and yelling and shrieking about the bees, a scientist would say, how interesting. A scientist would ask a question. So reframing their positionality from being a chased victim in this situation to a scientist that's curious and asking questions about the natural world. So what is it? Why am I afraid of it? What is it doing? I mean, with the exception of, murder hornets or something, I don't think any insects are actively seeking little people to bite and chew and sting. For the most part, it's not a problem. Now, that said, there's always exceptions. I know colleagues who've had kids go running through a field and there was like wasps under the ground and they all came up and everybody got stung. And I mean, that happens, right? That's not pleasant, but it happens. It's unusual when you look at all the amount of time that teachers spend teaching outdoors. Those kinds of incidents are rare. But again, it comes down to your responsibility as the adult to understand and know that there are hazards that exist in your space. If you've got a lot of like poisonous spiders and wood piles, maybe not having kids put their bare hands into a wood pile, making sure they're wearing gloves, or like thinking through as the adult, what is the outcome and what's possible here, and taking those precautions. But ultimately, if you have a positive attitude about insects and teach kids how to be curious, they'll be the same. It's not a problem. It just has to be modeled over time. Screaming is for emergencies. A scientist says, how interesting, right? Ask a question. Don't scream and yell. What's your question? Will it sting me? It might be the question, right? Modeling for them, that kind of behavior.
That's beautiful. I like it. I also have pictures of decomposers doing jobs like the leaf chomper, and I force the kids to tear a leaf into the found leaf into as tiny bits as possible, and ask them if they'd like to do that until the end of time. And they say no. I said, all right, we'll leave the insects alone because that's what they're doing, and yeah, like you said, bringing joy into it. I'm pretty sure that kind of all of these questions are kind of answering this as we go, but Sarah did ask, what are some great strategies to support emergent curriculum with children outdoors, like letting the children take the lead in their learning and letting them play? But maybe you want to just dive in a little bit more.
I mean, I feel like, do you want to say anything? We're play-based people. Like, that's what we do. We set the space up for play. We usually start with a story. Emergent learning really comes from participating in the world around us, right? It's a phenomenon that is unavoidable if you are participating in your world. So by giving children time, space, and freedom to participate, it's inevitable that they'll come across something that they have curiosity about. And I guess it comes down to your disposition and your belief of what your role is as a teacher. Like for me, I honestly believe quite strongly that my job is to make sure kids leave elementary school and go into high school loving learning. They're still curious. They're still wondering. There's still some joy in finding out something new. And so if we can do that through play, it really transforms a child's experience of school, right? So they come to school, they know that they can play, they can find something, they can be interested. And in all our years of doing this, there's all the curricular, everything you have to teach in a school situation can be covered through play. Sometimes it takes a little direction from us. Sometimes we have to particularly choose texts and books, or we have to curate some materials or resources to help scaffold that thinking going in a direction that we want. Yeah, play is where emergent learning comes from.
Yeah, beautiful. There's a couple of questions that are linked to sort of safety. And then what we'll do is we will do a soft close. We're going to do some prize giving, stay to the end. There are some prizes coming. And then we're going to carry on for about another 10 to 15 minutes because there are so many questions where we do a deeper Q&A as well. So if you answer a question, it's in my list, but it didn't get answered yet, we will come back to it after. But these two questions I'd love to answer. Lisa asks, have you got any suggestions for reassuring administration about liability, climbing trees? Or what about schools with, uniforms? And following on from that, Marianne says that where she works with an outdoor space, they have an environment where litter is constant near the school and they can't control it. There's lots of broken glass, for example. So I ask, rules, risk, liability. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's like a 2-hour conversation, but briefly,
okay, we'll do a workshop just on that in the future, everyone.
So when it comes to risk and benefit, I think the best resource for that is Outdoor Play Canada. It's a website that is where all researchers and practitioners in considering like design, space, and risky play practice come together. There's a lot of really good resources and information there. If you go on my blog, on my website, and just put risky play into the search bar, I've got tons of videos and resources from outsideplay.ca. There's risk reframing tools, for example. There's a tool that exists for parents. There's a tool that exists for early childhood educators. We're in the process of developing one for elementary school teachers right now. If it's any comfort for most people, these are like BC Children's Hospital and the Public Health Association of Canada. Like, these are big organizations that really support this kind of play because every measure of wellness in childhood is increased by time spent outdoors. And so we have to understand that sometimes bumps and scrapes and falls are a natural, normal part of childhood that gives a child a sense of agency and ownership over their own life so that they feel like they're competent, capable people when they become young adults. They're not constantly afraid and fearful of what might happen. They know what their limits are. They know how to move through this earth in a way that makes their body feel good. And we could go down the whole consent piece, right? Like, who gets to make decisions about how children use their bodies and what they're allowed to do with them? So that's a huge knot to untangle, but generally go into those resources, go to my website, just put risky play into the search engine. You'll find all kinds of blog posts. I've written about this extensively in schools. I'm a big fan of it, big supporter of it. And there's a lot of research to back it up. As for the garbage question, I think a lot of that comes from a lack of relationship. Right? So when we're in relationship with the land, we want to take care of it. And David Sobel writes a lot about how we have to teach children to love the earth before we ask them to save it, right? So if we want kids to take care of it, we have to spend time with it. They have to develop a relationship with the land before they are going to not litter it. We have garbage collection as one of our constant options, and it's hilariously popular. Like, it seems we have these little tongy things that they can use in buckets, and it's always a choice that kids have. You would be hard pressed to find litter on our garbage, like on our schoolyard, because it's such a popular it's such a popular choice for kids. They like using the tongs. They've got these like triggers that they can use and they pick them up. So the key might be just getting some really cool tongs that kids can use so they don't have to touch them, and a couple of awesome buckets. And then the other, like, the law of supply and demand is another important piece here, right? Like, if you've got a group of 25 kids and only 5 kids get to use the tongs, now this is the most popular choice because there's not enough for everybody, right? So you sort of set it up that way that this becomes this desirable thing to do, and it'll get cleaned up in a hot minute. Same with weeding. Weeding's the same. Kids are like locusts. They'll go right through and clean out all your weeds. So you have to kind of know how to work with kids a little bit, but also just make sure you've got the material there for them. So that's how we do it. We have kids do it, and it's never a problem. But if you have lots of partying happening, or I don't know what's happening after hours there, yeah, sending kids out, making signage. That's been another really successful piece for us, right? Making sure that we have signs that say these gardens are planted and cared for and harvested by the children of our school. And then in like bold letters and written in child script, it says, please do not steal from children, right? So, I mean, that's really reduced a lot of the theft problems that we've had in our school garden. We really don't have theft problems anymore, but we like plastered the schoolyard with those signs for years, and that made a big difference. So just brainstorm with the kids. What kind of messaging do we need to put here? Like, children play here could just be like, have it written in their writing, and then put it in like little Ziploc bags and put it on their stakes and make a little project out of it, and then get the cool picker-uppers and give them some ownership over the problem, right? They're not helpless in this situation, would be my answer.
Beautiful. Great thoughts. Okay, I'm going to cut it there just so we can do a soft close and let those people that really need to leave right on the hour go. Firstly, thank you. What an amazing presentation, and so thought-provoking and really engaging. So thank you for that. Want to share, we've got prizes, stay right to the end. But first, our next workshops and events. So following on in this spring series, we've got Casey Ray Christopher talking about school gardens. We've got Indigenous perspectives, walking forward with Gillian Judson and Heidi Wood. We've got reducing food waste with food cyclers, Indigenous learning resources with a whole host of Indigenous partners within our group. And we've got monthly campfire connections, which are virtual gatherings where you can come and share stories. And clearly from the chat, we've got a lot of really knowledgeable people as well. So we'd love to ask you to engage in those too. And so onto the prizes. I have 2 of those fantastic two-way nature viewers with bug included to give away. And we've got 2 toques. They're a merino wool blend. They're ethically produced and sourced in Canada from Take Me Outside. So get your typing fingers at the ready. I've got questions for you. Question, first person to get the correct answer is going to win one of our 2 nature viewers. Here we go. What natural pest control exists for aphids in the first slide? Oh my goodness.
Ladybug.
Wow,
Ladybug.
people are so fast. Okay,
Ladybug.
Alison Mevis, well done. Congratulations, Ladybugs is correct. Well done. Second question, everybody. Megan explained that one thing is particularly essential in order to have a successful looking closely session. Oh my gosh, I should have scrolled down before I got there. Hang on. Ladybugs. JC Gibb, the answer was time. You're correct. Don't rush it. Let them go out. Let them wander around and look at stuff. Okay, you're both winners of the nature viewers. On to 2 Take Me Outside toques. Here we go. Third question, there's one of 2 correct answers here. What are 2 words that Megan uses to describe things we find in nature? There were 2 things. Oh, Emma Blackshaw, you're in. Treasure was one of them. And I'm looking for one other. Gwen Corsi, gifts. Treasure and gifts. You are both winners of a fantastic Take Me Outside toque. We will take your email out of our registration list, and we'll get in touch with you in the next few days. Thank you so much for participating. So again, email will come out with a recording for the workshop and a link for a certificate. Please check your spam if you don't have it by tomorrow morning. It will be in there hiding. I just want to pass over really quickly to my wonderful friend Faheen, who's just going to say a quick couple of words about Take Me Outside before we close here.
Thank you so much, Jade. And thank you so much, Megan. That was an amazing presentation. And Sarah, the resource that you guys have put together is great. I'm glad everyone here can benefit from it. I just wanted to share quickly that you guys have, like, if you're regular at our weekly, well, sort of weekly webinars, you might have been seeing me, but I'm going on a leave for about a year because I'm giving birth. So Stephanie from Take Me Outside will be taking on these webinars. So I just wanted to introduce Steph really quickly. If you want to just come on camera and wave and say hi. You may know her from other TMO events, but yeah, Steph.
Thanks, Farheen. Yeah, and we're gonna miss Farheen. And yeah, if you've been a regular at the seasonal workshops, you've definitely seen her around. And if you've come to the virtual campfires, then maybe you've seen my face, but otherwise, I might be new to you, but I will be taking over at some point in the seasonal workshops here and hopefully into the future. We're hoping to continue the series onwards. We got lots of plans. And so we'll hopefully be seeing a lot of you soon. We had such a great turnout today, so it's so great to see hundreds of people all gathering together. So yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks, Steph, and thank you everyone for the congrats. Very sweet. I'll pass it over back to Jade.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet for him. Okay. Megan, is there last few questions here before we I just find someone who needs lovely. Okay, so last few questions for you. Where am I on my list? Okay, Marianne asked, do you recommend any resources, books, websites that can be used by teachers to become a bit more familiar with insects or biology? A few people talked about apps in the chat. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, there's some good apps that exist, but a lot of them you have to be careful because sometimes the identification isn't done by an expert. I'm again, very place-based educator. I think it's really important to create your own field guide, right? So these are the weeds of your schoolyard. These are the insects in your garden. So even if you only have 5 or 6 identified and creating a document that exists just that's specific to your school, that can be really helpful. And you can just create cards if you want with an image and a description. There's tons of opportunity for nonfiction reading and writing in that. There are lots of field guides that exist that are specific to your region. So if you're in British Columbia or the Southwestern United States, like find a field guide that exists specific to your region and then start looking through it. You can also look on websites, and those apps are a good place to start, but you need to know a little bit about it. So I would just say it's a personal journey. Some of the best like school gardeners and amateur entomologists that I know are people who don't know anything about it because they're co-learning with their learners. And if you know a lot about something, it's so easy just to throw the answer at a learner and just tell them the answer, and they don't actually learn anything from that, right? So if you don't know, that's actually such a gift for your students because you have to model what kind of question to ask on Google, or you have to think about how are we going to use this text, or is the appropriate field guide for our region, right? And why would there be, bugs in Vancouver that aren't in Nunavut, right? So thinking about these kinds of contextual, place-based, specific answers, and then learning that with your students is the best way to do it.
Can also say in the store we have these really fabulous, incredibly tear-proof, waterproof, child-proof mini field guides of the plants and the birds of your particular province or part thereof, and so that could be a great starting place. And then make the kids build their own field guide from what they actually find and use that as a basis for your own their own investigation and learning.
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. Bella asks, are the books available without the whole kit? Again,
I think we talked about that, and I think we are maybe going to make them available. I don't know. I guess that's a Duncan question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
I'm just like Lauren and Sarah and I, we're just the creator process here. We're not the business people. That's Duncan's job.
Hold this thought, but we encourage you to buy the kit as is for the moment. That's our recommendation. Lene or Len, sorry, not quite sure, asked, do you have suggestions for resources that connect to Indigenous teachings?
Yeah, again, that's a very place-specific answer. So connecting with your specific group of people that will have some teachings. Usually, if you connect through your school district, there's some sort of Indigenous support person there. That's a great person to start with for building those relationships that take a lot of time. So building in time for relationship building. And then usually there's an elder or there's somebody you can reach out to your local nation and ask if they'll come and do a plant walk with you, or if they'll come and do some kind of identification with you. You do need to budget for that. We can't ask for free time from our elders. So just relationship building, real people from real places is always the best way to do it, for sure.
If you're wondering where to get started in terms of book resources, we do have a few different groups or bundles of Indigenous resources in the store as well. We have the Strong Stories bundle, which covers basically coast to coast of Indigenous writers, that's published by Strong Nations, which is an Indigenous owned publishing house. We have some beautiful Métis, a Métis bundle that talks about medicine plants and the giving tree. So there are some options there just to sort of spark for your location. Nice, love the lighting change. Yes, I think that's it for questions at this moment. I just wanted to follow up and say if there are any francophones here, French teachers, that one of our fantastic educators who always comes to our workshops as part of things, Julie Gagnon, is actually going to be hosting the first monthly campfire, or the premier feu de camp virtuel, le 18th of May. Julie's going to be hosting that one. So if you're a French speaker and you're feeling a little bit left out, please know that we're working on it, and Julie will take you on an amazing journey then. Okay. Any more questions here in the chat before we say goodbye? Just making sure I didn't miss any in my list here. I just think it's been such a wealth of information, Megan and Sarah, and like looking at the kit, you just want to dive in and you just want to go out there, and you know, all the stuff I use from your work is also for me. I learn every time I'm out there. I feel fulfilled, and the joy, yeah, it's just a really beautiful
but also all this collective wisdom in this group. Like, so I'm just sort of running through the chat, there's a lot of good ideas, and it's when we come together like this, we're always better together. So
I think that's a perfect place to finish. We're better together. So get out there, start looking closely at things. If you feel inspired, our Looking Closely Outdoor Learning Kit is right here. I'm going to pop that right in the chat again for you. And we thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you join us for the rest of the series of our workshops. Thank you, Megan and Sarah, for your time. And to everyone, I wish you good night. Gaysip Gusquayet in the Tanaha language from here. Good evening. Merci bien. Bonsoir. And thank you to everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Take care.
Merci.